Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass stands a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. Rest assured, you'll get your money's worth. Greatest show in heaven and earth. You gotta see the show. It's a rock and roll. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll.
That was Emerson Lake Palmer, of course, and Carnival 9, which, of course, you will find on the fabulous album Brain Salad Surgery, one of my favourites. In fact, I'm a big fan of Emerson Lake Palmer, and I'm sure there's lots of other fans out there. In fact, I know there's lots of other fans out there. And if you're that way inclined, you'll find a new book on the bookshelves. When I say a new book, it's a kind of second edition. The book originally came out, I think, in 2000, and it's come out again. It's called Emerson Lake Palmer, The Show That Never Ends, and it's written by Forrester, Hanson and Askew. So there you go, three people writing about Emerson Lake Palmer. I'm talking to one of the three now, Frank Askew. How are you doing, Frank?
I'm doing good. Very good, John.
The thing with Emerson Lake Palmer is I've always found that they're a bit like Marmite. You either love them or you loathe them.
I know, yes. I think there's plenty of people who love them, fortunately, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it is very much a love-hate thing with ELP. The music, of course, is very diverse. You've got things that appeal to... I always found their music very diverse because you could listen to the jazz elements in sort of things like Take a Pebble and the piano improvisations on the live albums, and then you'd have things like Lucky Man and then the big Tarkus and Carnival Nines and Pirates. So for me, I loved it all, really. It's very diverse, and that, I think, was the appeal of the LP for me anyway.
Well, just before we started this interview, we were talking, and my first into the band was Pictures at an Exhibition, which was a very popular album, not least of all because it was very cheap. And I remember distinctly thinking, hang on, if I spend a bit more than it would cost for a single, I can have an album, which when you're sort of 13 is quite important, I think.
Yeah. And I think Pictures is one of those albums, I don't know if I'd heard that one first of all, I'm not sure I would have got into them the way I did. The first bit I heard was, I did buy the single Fanfare for the Common Man.
Right.
But really, I then got into them in sort of 79, and I was listening to, or a friend put on the Welcome Back live album, and it was the Carnival 9, and the bit into the drum solo, because I was just starting to play drums at the time.
Yeah.
And it was just that wow, I just couldn't believe it was three guys being able to play like that at the top of their game, and from that moment on, I was really hooked.
So moving on from being a fan of the band, how did you come to hook up with the other two guys and write a book?
Well, the project actually started in 1992 because ELP reformed, as you probably know, for the Black Moon tour. And, you know, as a fan, I was thinking, why is there no book on ELP? This is ridiculous, because every other band of the 70s had a book about them, you know, your Zeppelins and your Floyds and what have you. So I got talking to a number of fans, and one guy at the time, George Forrester, who's obviously one of the co-writers, we just decided, let's write a book, you know, simple as that. And we didn't have any writing experience. We were just fans of the band, and we got together the information, and it took a long time, a long process to get the book finally to a publisher who took it on, which at that time in 2000, when it got published, was Helter Skelter.
Yeah.
But in that time, we hooked up with each of the band members to do interviews with them and their management, so they were very helpful. And yeah, by 2000, they decided that it was available to publish, and Helter Skelter took it on, and I think it did quite well. It was the first ever book on ELP, so we're quite proud of that fact. And Martin Hanson came into the project towards the end. He's the third writer, of course, and yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
Of course, when the book first came out, it really was, I won't say pre-internet, but certainly the internet wasn't widely available at that point, was it? And of course, now with the internet, you can actually find lots of information about lots of bands. But I'm still old-fashioned. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer a book.
Yeah, and I think this latest edition, it was decided that a lot of the information, musical analysis and a really in-depth discography weren't required in this one because, as you rightly say, the internet... you can get all that information on there, but with this new book, there's some new stuff in there that wasn't in the first edition, hence why it's called Encore. We've got new interviews with people like William Neal, who did the artwork for Tarkus and Pictures, and we've got members of the orchestra, the tour in '77, Godfrey Salmon, who was a conductor, and other new interviews in there. So it's not really the old book with a couple of chapters tacked on the end. It's rewritten, revised, and fully updated. So we're very pleased with the end product.
Well, I've written down actually Redux, which is probably very applicable. So. Yeah. And having got the original book, I've been working through it, and yeah, there's some incredible stuff in there. And it's not, I mean, I suppose most people think Emerson, Lake and Palmer, progressive rock band. Yes, any book that comes out must have to, you've got to be a professor to read it. It's very readable.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's because, we're not, we're fans of the band, so we're trying to get a product out there that will appeal to not only the fans, but to the casual fan as well. So that was important to us as well. Yeah, I think it's a good read, and I hope everyone enjoys it.
Why do you think, and I've got my own sort of opinion on this, but why do you think, and let's be honest, the band in terms of popularity and commercial success are huge. The fans are very loyal. They've got millions of them across the world, and yet when it comes to the critics, they're absolutely reviled, and I can't understand why.
Well, a golden question. I mean, no one's ever erected a statue to a critic, so it's only one person's view, isn't it? And,
yeah.
Look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Progressive rock is one of those genres of music that's completely overlooked by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it's really weird because I think progressive is the word progressive is a very positive word. I mean, if the world wasn't progressive, we wouldn't get anywhere. And only in music does the word progressive seem to be a bad word. And I don't know whether or not the band was almost too good. They were too good at playing their individual instruments, and I think maybe critics thought they were just showing off. But I think they missed things like the humour on some of their albums, like Benny the Bouncer and the Sheriff and tracks like that. These were very clever and quite humorous pieces of music, and maybe some of the critics just didn't understand them.
If we were judging a band, and no one, you can never judge a band on one album. If there is one album that I'm not particularly fond of, it's Love Beach. And I'm not altogether sure that Keith, Greg and Carl are particularly fans of that album themselves.
No, I think there's, Carl said many times, there's about one good track on there, which is Canario. But like any band, you're going to have their peaks and troughs, but I think their batting average was pretty good. I think Black Moon was a very good album, the comeback album.
Yeah.
In '92, I thought that was very, very good. And, elements of Works were very, very good. Pirates, for example, was right up there for me as one of their best tracks. But some of the other tracks on that album may not be to everyone's taste. But that's the thing with the LP, it's so diverse, isn't it?
Well, having said that particular album, Works, contains the long version of Fanfare for the Common Man, which is a single, reached number 2. So if you think about that, I mean, and in those days you had to sell a lot of singles to get into the charts, and to get to number 2, you had to sell an inordinate amount of records.
Indeed, yeah. And I think Keith and Greg had success. Obviously, Greg with his Christmas song, and even Keith Emerson with Honky Tonk Train Blues, I think was a top 20 hit, if I remember correctly. So didn't release that many singles. I mean, Jerusalem, if you remember, was actually banned by the BBC for being blasphemous.
Yeah.
An unusual thing, but I think it's a great track, personally, or a great version of that hymn anyway.
Well, we're going to play one of my favourite tracks now, which is from the Trilogy album, and I love that album, but one of my favourite tracks, again, it's another Copeland piece, but this is Hoedown.
Indeed, great track.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer from the Trilogy album and Hoedown. I'm talking to Frank Askew today, who is one of the authors of the book that's out on the shelves now, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, The Show That Never Ends, Encore. And there's an interesting introduction by Carl Palmer, and it goes along the lines, I'm probably paraphrasing here. Yes, there was, when most people say, I've got great memories, there were good times and bad times, but generally it's the good times. I had lots of good times, but Carl seems to think it was the other way round.
I know Carl very well, and I think it was frustrating for him. I think that's the thing that he finds with it, was the frustration, particularly, and it's fairly well documented in particularly the high voltage rehearsals.
Yeah.
He tells you it was like that a lot of the time, trying to get material written of a standard, and he looks back. He looks back, and I think maybe there were missed opportunities. What can I say? They've sold 40, 50 million odd albums, so it wasn't all bad.
I think that it's like any group of musicians, and I think it's even more under the microscope, if you like, when there's only three of them, when it's a trio. And I can remember talking to Carl Palmer, and he said, with regards to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, he said, we can meet up and go and take the dog for a walk, we can go out for a meal and have a great time, have a drink. He said, we could probably play live, but he said, getting in the studio, he said, is not very good for us.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they've said it many times, they're like a family, aren't they? They'll have their fallouts and then they'll kiss and make up, and but there you go. I think a lot of bands are like that, and I think they are very passionate individually about ELP, so there's going to be conflict there, but ultimately it all goes to the good music that they produced. I mean, think of albums like Tarks and Brain Salad Surgery. I mean, wow, if there's a bit of tension there in the makings of those albums, it was obviously in a positive way.
Well, I think sometimes there needs to be a little bit of creative tension in order to come out with stuff like that, if I'm honest.
Oh, absolutely. Any great band like The Who and the Beatles, and Pink Floyd, famously, they've all had tensions within the band. Any band that doesn't have tensions is probably not going to produce really great music that lives on.
Well, that was the thing about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I think you said it at the beginning of the interview. There are a number of entry points, really, for the band. When I first saw them, which would be late 72, after, I think, Trilogy came out, so I remember it being near Christmas, and there was the really great musical part of the gig. There was the exciting rock part, and despite what many people say, Emerson, Lake and Palmer were a really exciting rock band. They weren't just sort of, if you like, up their own backsides. They were really, really good musicians who knew how to have a good time and convey that good time to an audience. And I was absolutely knocked out the first time I saw them. The next time I saw them was on the Brain Salad Surgery tour, and I've got to say, it was still exciting, but the stage set at that point, really, they'd stepped up a gear. It looked like Battersea Power Station on stage at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought they were musical athletes, really. And the stage show obviously got bigger and bigger and bigger. It had to, didn't it? But
yeah.
I remember listening to Danny Baker, and he's seen a lot of music, and he still to this day says that ELP are the greatest live band he's ever seen. He remembers being pinned into the back of his seat just with the sheer power of it. And for him to say that, I thought, wow, he's seen a lot of music. And
yeah.
I was quite pleased to hear that. So yeah, they're definitely an experience live. When you think there's just the three of them on the stage there, utterly brilliant live.
I tell you what I have found. I found Emerson, Lake and Palmer fans in the strangest of places as well. And we all know, like, for instance, Danny Baker. Jim Davison is another big fan, isn't he?
He is. And I'll tell you a story here, is Jeremy Clarkson. Carl and I and his partner and his daughter Carissa, we went to a recording of Top Gear during the rehearsals for the High Voltage show. And Carissa arranged this for Carl as a birthday. It was just after his 60th birthday, and got in contact with Clarkson, Jeremy Clarkson, and he invited us along to a recording of the Top Gear show. And not many ELP fans know this, but if they know which episode it's on, they can see Carl in the audience there. He wasn't doing the driving the car.
Oh, okay.
We were just in the audience watching a recording of Top Gear, and then we met Clarkson and James May after the show and had drinks, and he is a fan, absolutely a fan of ELP, and a lot of classic and progressive rock. So that was a good experience. But you're right, Jim Davison is a very, very big fan. And in fact, he was quite helpful in the first edition of the book that we wrote. He gave us some information and some stories that were quite good.
When you were putting the book together originally, and also with Encore, were there any stories that surprised you?
There's always, I won't give them all away in the book, so
no.
In the book, but there are some.
Well, the one I'm thinking about is the Bill Bruford connection.
Oh, right, for the Emerson Lake and Powell, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Simon Phillips was another drummer named.
Well, I can see Simon Phillips, but not least of all because his surname begins with P, but yeah, Emerson, Lake and Bruford.
Yeah, there was that one. There's a few others in there. There's some quite interesting stories about people who've worked with the band. To say, I won't spoil it, but there's always little nuggets coming out here and there where you speak to new people and think, oh yeah, that is interesting. So,
of course, Emerson, Lake and Palmer played their final gig at the High Voltage Festival. Since then, Carl has gone out with an excellent show, which I was lucky enough to see in America earlier this year, Carl Palmer's ELP Legacy. How do you feel about that, being a fan of... I mean, obviously, you're a friend of Carl's and you're a fan of what he does.
Yes.
And I saw it and I thought, very clever twist. I'm thinking, how are they going to work this with a guitar? And it works incredibly well.
It does, yeah. And I think he was, and rightly so, didn't want to go out with a keyboard player and a singer, because then it would just be compared to ELP. And I think the music is so good. I mean, I've heard orchestras doing versions of Tarkus, and now you've got Carl's band doing guitar instrumental versions of ELP pieces. So the music's that good, and it gives younger people who are into guitars maybe an opportunity to listen to ELP, and they think, oh, blimey, maybe I'll go and get an ELP album. So, it freshens it up and it gives it a new twist. I think that's all good. It's all good for the ELP legacy, as Carl now calls his band, which is a change because he always called it the Carl Palmer Band. So he's still very proud of the legacy, and rightly so, I think.
No, I agree. I think Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and there were always going to be people who say, no, rubbish, pretentious rubbish, but I usually find that those people have only sort of scratched the surface and don't really know the depth that certainly of music and certainly the talent behind the band, but also the music that they've recorded and performed. And I always tend, if I'm honest, to disregard those people who just go rubbish, because as I've said, they've never really listened to what the band have done.
I agree. I mean, pretentious is a word I've never really understood why people call it pretentious, because it's just three guys showing what they can do, and that happens in all music. And I've always thought that, and it's just a personal opinion, but you get singers like Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston who are singing a song, and they go off in with these vocal gymnastics, and to me that's quite pretentious. It's not serving the music in my view, but yeah, I can understand why people call the LP pretentious, but I think they were just putting, with their shows anyway, they were putting all the money they made back into making the show as big and as spectacular as possible, and they were just wanted to show how good they were on their instruments, and by being that good, I think that inspires people to want to play. And you look at sport, you get people in sport who want to run faster and do the best they possibly can to inspire others, and why not in music? And for me, Carl Palmer's drummer inspired me to be a drummer, and I'm sure Emerson's keyboard skills have undoubtedly influenced thousands and thousands of keyboard players, and that's great, and why not?
Well, I always thought, whenever I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I always thought it was a spectacle, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a spectacle myself.
Well, you paid your money, and it's showbiz at the end of the day. You want to see a show, don't you? You want to hear the music played well, but you want to see a show, and it was great watching Emerson on his Steinway go up in the air and spinning round, and Carl's kit revolving, and the Tarkus coming onto stage and stuff like that. Why not?
But you know what? I even got the humour of somebody coming on to vacuum Greg's Persian rug. I mean, a lot of people thought that was serious. It was, I mean,
a lot of stuff like that is just small change today, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
ELP were one of the first. Yeah, fantastic. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, the book is available now. It's Emerson, Lake and Palmer, The Show That Never Ends, Encore. It's by Forrester Hanson and the gentleman I've been speaking to today, Frank Askew. Frank, great to speak to you. And I suppose it is a case of welcome back, my friends, to The Show That Never Ends. But we're going to go out with the song that you first bought, probably, which along with a lot of other people, Fanfare for the Common Man. Thanks for talking to me today.
Thanks, John. Take care. Bye for now.